Okay, this is 5 on United States and genocide. I'm going to wrap it up. Going to get to Mexico, Mexicans. Biggest thing is this is not revolutionary. Okay, this is historical. These are facts. If you are so red, white, and blue crazy that America can do no wrong, you have to know this information to properly defend America. If you're not and you're a revolutionary, this is information you need to be equipped with to have an intelligent conversation against people who oppose your view. So either side you're on, this is information that is necessary to move forward with an educated opinion and experience. So this is what this information is about. It is not about revolution. It's not about not revolution. It's not about, supporting some of the things in history that have been prevalent. It's about being informed, and whatever your position is, it be an informed position. All right. So we're going to go to 1845, which was the annexation of Texas. Now, I'm going to oversimplify some things because these are 10-minute long videos, and they're purposely 10-minute long videos. Again, we talked about why they're short. So in some of the oversimplification, please do not take that as for lack of a better term, erroneous information. So I'm going to simplify some pretty sophisticated things. Like the annexation of Texas. Why is that important? Well, we have part of mass incarceration, which is the major area of focus that I am studying from a historical perspective. I'm taking mass incarceration all the way back to 1492 with the coming of Christopher Columbus, because in his journal, one of the first things he wrote as he saw the natives was, they will make good servants for us. So that was the first intent, 1492. There's some other things that come around 1492 that are extremely important. We had talked about with Albert Crosby's book, but for this purpose, I keep going back a little bit so we'll understand that we're still on the same track. Now, 1845, December 29th, 1845, Texas was annexed. Now, why is this important to us, for us to know? One of the big things that everybody was talking about this year, or in the last election, or period, I mean, for the last 20 years, is this immigration. Oh man, that's our biggest enemy. That's poor people's biggest enemy. It's Mexicans coming over here. Okay, let's look at that. Why is it they don't want, why is it the southern border is this huge problem, but the northern border isn't? Why was Texas annexed? Again, we got to look at the words. Remember, when white people were free, they did a declaration. When black people were allowed liberty, not freedom, freedom and liberty, two different things. But when black people received quote unquote freedom, they were given a proclamation. America was discovered. Well, we can't say we took Texas, so we annexed Texas. Well, how could you annex something that's not yours? White people took or Europeans took the kind nature of Mexicans. Say, hey, you want to move into Mexico? Come on, go ahead, no problem. Well, enough of them moved into the Mexican territory known as Texas, as to where so many got there that they said, we want to be part of the United States. Hence, the majority ruled and the land was then moved to the United States, which is why they do not want Mexicans to come back into the United States for the same thing to happen. If Mexicans come in and become a majority in a particular state, the voting could make the same thing happen. So the United States knows how they took it from Mexico. So they just don't want the reverse to happen. And that's why we're, as poor people, are fed that Mexicans are our problem. They're taking the jobs of poor people. Same thing they did with the Orientals, the Chinese, with the railroads. It was Vanderbilt. It was those rich white railroad barons that were hiring, but they were telling poor white people that it was the Orientals that was their problem because they were taking their jobs. But it was who was hiring them. It was the white person doing it. So it's always been that play in between the elite white and the poor white. That's where everything kind of circles from in American history. But we'll definitely move on that. Now, after this quote-unquote annex in 1845, and then this is during President Tyler's time, they wanted to tell them they're taking Texas in the first place. Now they want to tell Mexico how big Texas is. Mexico's saying, look, we're going to give it to you, but this is how big it is. Well, ultimately, they just take from Idaho, from the lower third of Idaho, down to what is now the border, and from Texas all the way to California. And the quote-unquote treaty was, okay, this is how much we're going to give you for this land. And they said, no, you took Texas. We don't really want to do no more business with you because you took Texas from us and then acted funny about land you took from us. And because they didn't want to do business with the United States, because the United States proved themselves untrustworthy with the taking of Texas, the United States went to war with them. Notice, and if you notice, the Indian treaties are always after a war. They'll force a treaty on them. The people don't want the treaty. They'll go to war with them and then make them sign the treaty to stop for them to stop killing them, which is odd because they will write down what they did. It's just we don't read it. So if we learn this, how the country has functioned, we'll understand better some of the positions that are not to be taken lightly. The position of Native Americans, the position of blacks in this country, because they have some logic and history behind them. So you have the Mexican-American War, and that's in 1847, and there's some other funny things going on at that time, but that I don't want to get too far off of our square here. So now we have this huge issue of the immigration laws and building a wall and all of these things. You're building a wall on something that you stole. And I think people would have a much different perspective, or with an educated background, of that particular border. It's a big difference from people trying to come back to a land that was taken from them than to invade somebody else's country. Also, there should be reparations due for all of that land that was taken, all of the minerals that were. They didn't just take that land because they ain't had nothing else better to do. You got to remember, that's where the gold rush was. That's where the silver rush was. That's where all the mining was. That's where all of the. Just think about the oil in Texas alone. All of those riches that are owed to Mexico, and for these people to be coming and just trying to get jobs just to take care of themselves. They're not coming back taking over oil fields and industry, which they very well should be. But these are the things that we need to know before, as common people, we are talking about people coming into our country. A lot of people don't know that simple version of facts. And we need to kind of open ourselves up to that. So we have these three groups: blacks, Native Americans, and Mexicans, with a form of genocide. I mean, just the murder that went with Mexicans, all of these groups living or having an experience consistent with the United Nations definition of genocide. It brings us back to Malcolm X's premise of why is this being ignored and why is this not being taken before the United Nations? What is that process and what is stopping that process? Because if the process is not going to naturally happen, why is it there? But these are the questions that we can ask when we have the proper information. And then if we have the preceding information, we know what questions we need to be asking now. So if I'm a revolutionary and I feel that I want to carry on Malcolm X's purpose, I have this foundation of information to say, okay, now the questions I need to be asking right now is that about how would the United States be brought to task under the United Nations genocide laws? And why is that not happening? What is the process? Why is it the United States is 3% of the world's population holding 40% of the world's prisoners, and I believe they have 25% of the world's prisoners. I'm going to check that. A high percentage of the world's prisoners, being that small of the population, and 40% of that number of prisoners come from 8% of the population being black men. So even to this day, 2018, there are infractions of the genocidal laws of the United Nations. We have to develop this information so we have a clear understanding of our perspective, whichever side we're on, because you need to understand your opponent and you need to have an educated foundation to defend your position.